Life on Earth. See, I don't have the jingle ready because I haven't decided whether we're really going to use the jingle, but hello, you good people.
Hello.
Now, this is Life on Earth, but due to OCON, we're going to do a quick show, quick clubhouse, quick introduction. If objectivism is, in Ayn Rand's own words, a philosophy for living on Earth, then it stands to reason that applying this philosophy and these ideas to one's life can, should, and will lead to success, happiness, joyfulness, optimism, gratitude, cheerfulness, benevolence, and piles and piles and piles of money.
Oh, and fun too.
Yeah, or whatever you value even more highly than money. See, it's OCON time.
OCON time.
It is OCON time.
Woo.
Yes, and with all of our preparations in place and our house setter secured and too much electronic equipment and musical gear loaded into a suitcase, we'll see if Delta Airlines allows that to go through. We are Austin bound.
Yes, we're going to be going to Austin, Texas.
We're on the road again.
Where they say y'all. I don't know if they talk like that. I have no idea.
Yeah, my guess would be they actually don't, and so it's going to be one of those funny things. But besides the being the premier general interest objectivist conference, OCON, besides this being the conference of the year, with outstanding presentations, OCON is also the primo numero uno, number one social event of the year.
It sure is.
See, and that brought to mind a topic that Amy has asked us to address.
Have I? What is this topic?
So the topic in question is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Test Paradigm.
Paradigm.
And we do need to talk about this because it came up on Facebook. It came up on the social networks the other day.
Yep.
And somebody in the objectivist community, somebody with some standing in the objectivist community,
yeah, super awesome person,
tried to dress down Mrs. Nasir.
Oh, no.
For bringing up
no, it wasn't
MBTI.
Like that. It wasn't like that. No. It was a good question. It's a very good question.
It was not a question. It was more like, this is all hogwash. Why are you bringing this up?
It was a good question.
It had "how dare you" written all over it. And it was a long protest against you bringing up the topic.
It was just a different perspective, and that's okay.
Okay. It's good that you're making this not about the person.
Well, no.
But no. I know you've been wanting to talk about this, and it's interesting to me because I'm not an MBTI guy or a DISC guy or an IQ test guy or any of these test things. It seems like every time I test it, I get a different result anyway. Right. So it's a bit of a challenge to me.
But I think that what you have found is that happens to just a lot of people. You retake the test and you're like, oh, now they're telling me I'm an artist. Oh, no, they're telling me I'm a moderator. Oh, no, they're telling me, I'm an entrepreneur. Blah, blah, blah.
Blah,
and,
blah,
and,
blah.
And blah, blah, blah.
But here's the part where it gets good.
Yeah.
And here's why I wanted to talk about this.
Okay. All right.
Because Amy convinced me that, well, there is value in these things. And once I just accepted provisionally, okay, maybe there's value in these things, I realized it connects to a really important issue for me.
Okay.
And that is labels and the importance of labels. Because I got into a similar conversation a little bit ago with somebody who said, oh, you shouldn't use labels. I can't even remember what the topic was, but just the very idea that I had used a label, probably to describe myself as something, probably shy or introspective or whatever it was, So you should never use labels. What you should do is you evaluate the actual person, because labels just get in the way. Now, I'm going to leave the mystery of what's wrong with that. I shouldn't say wrong. I'm going to leave the mystery of what I disagreed with about that perspective until after we take a quick look at MBTI.
Yeah. Now Daniel in the chat here, he says, "Oh, these things are almost like new horoscopes."
I love that. And the reason I love that is not A, you're not the first person to make the comparison to astrology, but B, I had lunch with my daughter today, mentioned what my topic for the day was, and she said, "Oh yeah, that's kind of a lot like astrology." I forget exactly what she said, but yeah, she could not resist bringing up the horoscope.
God, this slide you put up is really complex looking.
It's incredibly busy.
So, yike.
So let's make this simple.
Oh, okay. All right. And the thing is that I brushed up on Myers-Briggs, and the how they define thinking versus feeling, or what feeling is not exactly what you think feeling is. So it's more about responding to your values, as they say, rather than just, this is logical, therefore I'm going to do it. I am thinking, and I shall now determine what action I'm going to take based on that, as opposed to, like, for me, what are my values? What do I like? Do I hate this? Do I like this? Do I like any part of this? In other words, I'm awful picky, and I oftentimes try to make my decisions on what I most enjoy. And I think that's obviously normal, but
we've talked about making your values explicit.
Yeah.
You should have, and now I mean you listening to this out there right now, you should have on paper a value hierarchy.
Yeah.
Your top 10 values and the top 3 that are primary. You should know your values explicitly. Great. But what about this stuff? These aren't values. These are inclinations.
They are, what it all really comes down to, and tell me if I'm stealing your thunder here, they're choices. They are basically personality descriptions that help you define where you're at, where you might be at in life, how you might be perceived, how you might actually function.
Well, I'm going to push back on that a little bit, because my question is going to be, are they really choices? And if so, does the measurement mean anything? If they tell you, well, you're 70% thinking and 30% feeling, does that mean you've chosen that? And can you choose something else?
Right. And I think this is what I think. Because knowledge is contextual, as we know. So you've got, for instance, shyness. I learned in my life that I was shy when I was a little girl, and growing up, I actually had to really work hard to overcome all of that. And I did, to a certain extent. However, I still have a tendency to be, I guess you could call it, introverted, to be, to not be so out there and gregarious, because it really saps my energy if I do that, which I can do it, but it for some people, it doesn't sap their energy. For me, it does. And that's okay. And that's, I think it's more of a physiological tendency that I have, that is, and that I think that is metaphysical. That's not something that I can just zap out of my life, zap out of my personality, but it is something that I can compensate for, and that I can choose to go against that tendency, because I'd rather be gregarious sometimes.
So it sounds like you're saying, if you're aware of your temperament and inclinations, then you can either capitalize on it or be aware that you need to work against it.
Yes.
Well, here's the thing. I've gotten pushback against exactly that kind of statement. So in Myers-Briggs, they figured out the 4 dimensions that matter, that seem to affect the majority of our behavior, are whether you are more extroverted or introverted, whether you are more sensing, and by that they mean physical reality-based or perception-based, or intuitive, whether you are, in objectivist terms, we would say an intrinsicist or a subjectivist, but that's not what they mean. Just, do you focus first on the facts of reality, or do you focus first on what you know and your intuitions about it. Then thinking versus feeling.
Mhm.
Now that's bizarre. How could there be a one or the other? Each goes in their place.
Right.
And then judging and perceiving. And it's interesting because if you take the test, what you see is what your natural or default inclinations are,
Mhm.
what your temperament is.
Right.
But if it's a choice, how can that be? And that's why we need to talk about this. Again, you've got these personality types based on extroversion versus introversion. People who are sense-oriented versus intuitive, people who are prone to analytical thinking versus people who are broad context,
Mhm.
and people who immediately go to a judgment versus people who remain dispassionate and save the judging for later, if they even get around to it. Now, that goes right to a comment in the chat, but first I've got to give a shout out to Dr. Honig.
Yes.
I don't know
Thank
if
you so
Jonathan
much.
Honig actually has a PhD, but he's a doctor of karaoke. If you've heard the Weekly Objective, not only is he a brilliant man in finance,
Yes.
but he's an awful lot of fun.
Yes.
And a big contribution to the AynRandCenter.co.uk folks with a 1999 super chat.
Woo!
Anybody who puts a super chat in the chat at this show, first of all, if you ask a question, we're guaranteed to answer your question.
Yes.
Second of all, your money goes to support the Ayn Rand Center, which is responsible for the channel this show appears on and keeps the lights on over in London, because it is the Ayn Rand Center UK.
Mhm.
And very much appreciated.
Yeah,
Now,
Jonathan, you are amazing.
now, not in the super chat, but I have to answer it because it directly relates to the topic at hand and
Mhm.
also the value hierarchy we mentioned earlier. Scott asks, if every is implies an ought, does that mean every perception implies a judgment? Now, I think every perception would have to be going too far because perception can be passive, but every conception, every thought
Yeah.
implies a judgment.
Yes.
And in particular, every choice to focus or choice to focus on a specific thought or fact implies a judgment. If you go back to the show where we discussed Yander Bernstein's lecture, How to Be an Impassioned Valuer,
Mhm.
it's one of the shows in which we brought up that you should have a hierarchical value list. One of the points that Dr. Bernstein makes is everything has value significance. Nothing is value insignificant.
Mhm.
He likes the expression, it's either for you or it's against you. It's either for you or against you. Even if it has zero significance to you, if you are spending time on it, if it's a time waster, if it's a distraction, then it has a negative significance or negative value. So the short answer to Scott's question, if every is implies an ought, does every perception imply a judgment, is, oh, hell yes. So
Heck
there you go.
Yes.
Now, what was interesting to me is
Yeah.
that once we get out of Myers-Briggs, I'll take these screenshots down in a moment. It turns out, and this seemed a little more business oriented, at least from the use cases I've seen, there's the DISC personality test,
Mhm.
in which they regard your level of dominance or your level of influence
Mhm.
or your level of conscientiousness
Mhm.
or your level of steadiness or steadfastness as the 4 personality characteristics that you need to know about yourself, that you can capitalize, that you can use to figure out which employees are best suited to which tasks. And that was interesting to me because this one doesn't have opposites involved. It simply has 4 different areas. And the more that I look at these personality models and personality type tests,
Mhm.
the more I see why people get weary about them.
Yeah.
Because as valuable as it can be to realize, I am an introspective kind of person,
Yes.
and I need to spend more time engaged, more time being extroverted or extrospective. The more you do that, the more you realize it's not a particular paradigm that you need. It's simply that level of awareness.
Right.
And what the paradigm, whether you're into MBTI or DISC, the paradigm just gets you there. I've seen flaws and I've seen people who question MBTI and how it can capture you in a rut. And then I can see why the no labels crowd gets all up in a tizzy.
A tizzy.
Yes. And those of you who are no labels advocates, you know who I'm talking about. There was actually an organization started in 2010 called No Labels. And believe it or not, those people are still out there. There's the Gang of Nine right
Oh,
now
that sounds
in
special.
Congress who they're working with. And they're a gang of nine, I think they call them reasonable Democrats.
Oh, are they in a band?
No, and they're not running the Chinese government. And it's just interesting to me that there's still a no labels organization. And the idea is if you put a label on it, people stop looking at reality and just look at the label. If you tell me you're a Republican, I'm going to immediately assume
that you're anti-abortion, anti-immigration, anti-this, anti-that.
you don't, and you don't care about individuals.
Right.
You only care about civilization and your cause.
Yes.
That you will sacrifice anybody if it means keeping Western civilization going.
Yeah. Morality has to be based on religion. Yeah.
And your whole model is it furthering civilization or is it leading us back to barbarism? If you tell me you're a libertarian, all you care about is the individual, and you will not care about unfairness or even injustice, and you certainly won't care about Western civ. You will say all that matters is, did people leave me alone? And if you identify as a liberal, your primary concern will be, was somebody oppressed? Was somebody treated unjustly? And you will not care about individual rights. You will, but only to the extent that furthers. So point is,
you talked about this system before.
But my point here is you put a label on something. You put one of these labels, you use one of these measurements, and you stop seeing the person. Now, I actually disagree with that, but I see the kernel of truth.
Right.
And I think it's important. And why do I bring this up on this show where we're like fans of Ayn Rand talking about life on Earth? Because I see a lot of us, and sometimes me, making the same mistake. The best example, the example I'm going to cite, the one that's going to make this all clear to you, and you'll be like, oh, that's what he's talking about, is the concept tabula rasa. Now, what has that got to do with OCON being this week? Let me tell you. There are a lot of people, and I run into them, and I'm not going to give names, so no, I'm not going to back that statement up. But if you're in the philosophy, you know who I'm talking about. There are a lot of people who believe that tabula rasa means that there is no such thing as temperament.
Oh, no such thing as temperament. I see. Okay.
It's interesting. There's an A in temperament. So it would really be temperament, but we kind of gloss over that.
Gloucestershire.
Yeah. Well, when I say temperament, it sounds wrong. It's like when Yaron Brook says remnant instead of remnant. So the point is, there are blank slate advocates, tabula rasa advocates who say, well, if you're born with, or if you genetically have a temperament, you're not tabula rasa. Therefore, temperament is a lie.
Well,
MBTI is a lie. DISC is a lie. Personality profiles only tell you something random about where you're at today. They don't really tell you anything at all.
So the physical mechanism of having a body should not and does not influence
psychology,
temperament, your emotional mechanism,
yes,
or any of that.
Well, when you put it that way, gosh, you make them sound silly.
Oh, gosh.
but here's the thing. This is not simple.
Yeah.
Because I think what happens is a lot of people read Ayn Rand and maybe a little bit out of context. Here, I'm going to pull a quote from Atlas Shrugged.
All right.
This is our hero of Atlas Shrugged.
Do that.
In the big speech. The big speech, which the first time everybody reads Atlas Shrugged, they read that speech, go back to the beginning of the speech and read it a second time. Oh, maybe I got that backwards. Anyway, reading from the central speech in Ayn Rand's novel Atlas Shrugged, quote, you seek escape from pain, we seek the achievement of happiness. You exist for the sake of avoiding punishment. We exist for the sake of earning rewards. Threats will not make us function. Fear is not our incentive. It is not death that we wish to avoid, but life that we wish to live. Now, after going into detail in the speech, he then states, the name of this monstrous absurdity is original sin. The name of this monstrous absurdity.
Yep.
Yes. A sin without volition is a slap at morality and an insolent contradiction in terms. That which is outside the possibility of choice is outside the province of morality. If man is evil by birth, he has no will, no power to change it. If he has no will, he can be neither good nor evil. A robot is amoral. To hold as man's sin a fact not open to his choice is a mockery of morality. To hold man's nature as his sin is a mockery of nature. To punish him for a crime he committed before he was born is a mockery of justice. To hold him guilty in a matter where no innocence exists is a mockery of reason. To destroy morality, nature, justice, and reason by means of a single concept is a feat of evil hardly to be matched, yet that is the root of your code. Just a bit more here. Do not hide behind the cowardly evasion that man is born with free will, but with a tendency to evil. A free will saddled with a tendency is like a game with loaded dice. It forces man to struggle through the effort of playing, to bear responsibility and pay for the game, but the decision is weighted in favor of a tendency that he had no power to escape. If the tendency is of his choice, he cannot possess it at birth. If it is not of his choice, his will is not free.
How would you suppose that, is there a definition of tendency there or anything alluding to that there?
No.
Okay.
So, and that's a great question to ask, because what does a tendency in this regard mean? In other words, is a temperament, and again, here we're talking about shyness or sensitivity or aggressiveness,
Right.
or meekness or inquisitiveness. Are any of these character traits moral or
No.
immoral?
No,
Do any of them have a moral dimension?
no. I would say they're metaphysical in nature. And as a matter of fact, as I recall, Ayn Rand herself was disappointed that she couldn't get over her what she called physical timidity. She was physically timid. And she talked about this. I forget exactly where she talked about this, but I know she did. So
Yes.
she was very conscientious of herself, or conscious of her own personality.
Yes.
And she would go so far as to ask Marianne Suarez, what do I look like, on the outside to the rest of the world? I see myself, internally, how do I look? So she went to a trusted friend who she really trusted and admired, Marianne Suarez, and asked this. And I think, so I think she was very much, she thought that concept was valid because she used it in her own life.
Yes. Now, Eric Hollis is giving away the punchline in the chat. Tabula rasa only applies to ideas, not to the other automated processes that are not under our choice. And unquote Eric there, thank you. And the distinction I want to make here is a personality trait or a psychological trait and a character trait. Now, we need to connect this to this week, and we're going to do this in a few different ways. The most silly way I'm going to do it, or the most sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? The most conceptual way to do it is based on this book behind me here, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. We are going to OCON to celebrate OPAR.
Yes.
And that's the whole purpose of this week coming up. So I have to quote Leonard Peikoff in Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. We talked about temperament, personality traits. Well, what then are character traits? Well, Leonard Peikoff says in OPAR, character means a man's nature or identity insofar as it is shaped by the moral values he accepts and automatizes. By moral values, I mean values which are volitionally chosen. and which are fundamental, i.e., shape the whole course of a man's action, not merely a specialized, delimited area of his life. So, a man's character is, in effect, his moral essence, his self-made identity as expressed in the principles he lives by. Unquote, Leonard Peikoff, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand.
Mhm. Yes.
So what I'm seeing, and if this hits home with you or even has any insider value to you, I hope so, because I see it over and over again, but also people who wouldn't make the claim do make the mistake. I certainly do. Look up tabula rasa in the lexicon, and it seems to me straightforward that this would not imply that man doesn't have a psychology or doesn't have temperament. Tabula rasa, since man has no automatic knowledge, he can have no automatic values. Since he has no innate ideas, he can have no innate value judgments. Man is born with an emotional mechanism, just as he is born with a cognitive mechanism. But at birth, both are tabula rasa. It is man's cognitive faculty as mind that determines the content of both. And again, as Eric pointed out in our chat, temperament isn't content. Tabula rasa refers to content, to ideas.
But ultimately, I mean, even if it is something like shyness, ultimately the contents, conceptual contents of your mind determine that. How you evaluate your shyness, whether or not you want to be shy in life, whether or not you want to change your personality to the extent that you can.
Well, there we get to the larger topic of free will. And for that, I'm going to go to the companion to Ayn Rand.
Well, before you do that,
Yes.
Let's talk about Ayn Rand Center UK and becoming a member.
You should, well, I'm sure you already are. But if you're not already a member at the Ayn Rand Center UK, you can go to aynrandcenter.co.uk, sign up to become a member. Center, incidentally, spelled in that charming British way with an R-E at the end. Link will be posted in the chat just so that you get it right. We'd hate for you to go to it spelled the wrong way and end up at some porn site like whitehouse.gov, where Joe Biden will tell you what he thinks about how to handle Afghanistan. Now, there's a great example of temperament. Somebody born with, say, a high energy psychology or an aggressive psychology could turn out to be a criminal acting on his emotions, or a narcissist taking advantage of people left and right, or he could turn out to be like Jocko Willink, a Navy SEAL who's gone on to become something of an intellectual. If you haven't seen Jocko Willink's Instagram this week, look up Jocko Willink for president, and you will see Jocko Willink delivering just a 3-4 minute speech, what he would say if he was president right now, what he would have Joe Biden say right now, if he could. So yes, your temperament is a thing, just like psychology, the scientific study of the human mind and its functions, especially those affecting behavior in a given context. Psychology is, in fact, a thing, and you, in fact, have a nature. Here, I'm going to quote Dr. Rines in A Companion to Ayn Rand here.
Which is a great book.
It is a great book. Except it seems I may have, oh, here we go. I did mark my spot. He writes, "We cannot change our past. And at any given point in time, like it or not, we have those dispositions that we have acquired. We may be able to change ourselves, but it is not always obvious what we can change, how quickly, and in what manner. One cannot, after years of abusing drugs, wake up one day and decide, without any work or struggle, one will have no problems whatsoever in giving them up. Likewise, one cannot simply order oneself to stop loving another or to believe otherwise than one does and expect anything like immediate self-compliance. Here again, consciousness has identity, And volition is not a violation of identity or causality. We have a nature. And it's obvious. It's self-evident to anybody who's ever tried to make a change in their life and realized, I can't just will myself
Right.
as an act of will to, work out for 60 minutes a day, or eat fewer carbohydrates, or stop abusing drugs, or change the way that I'm thinking right now.
Mhm.
There's a reason that takes time and effort. And the reason that takes time and effort is temperament is a thing. Psychology is a thing. Character is a thing. There's an example, I think it's an OPAR, which I should have found ahead of time, where Leonard Peikoff makes the point that a lifetime of immoral behavior cannot be changed on a dime.
Right.
That one's character, their psychology requires effort, and it can be an extraordinary effort to pull yourself back out of a lifetime of immorality to live a life of virtue.
Right.
And likewise, Harry Binswanger has made this point that a virtuous man
Yes.
is essentially incapable of extreme irrationality.
Right.
It is virtually impossible for him to murder somebody on a dime.
Right. That's helpful in court for character witnesses, and especially if there was some sort of mistaken identity at play.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as we get ready to go to OCON,
Can't wait.
I couldn't resist reviewing my own personality.
Oh.
And it turns out I took Myers-Briggs, their test once, a long time ago. Can't even tell you what I was. INTJ, probably, whatever all the other shy objectivists are. And Lord knows there's a lot of us.
IN. Oh, it's another IN.
And this time around, I actually came up E and something else weird. I don't even remember. Again, Amy's the Myers-Briggs person.
No, I'm not.
So what was fun about that for me is thinking in advance. I always tell you, you should apply purpose, not just to your central purpose, but to everything you do. And in reviewing for myself to make sure I get the maximum fun and benefit out of OCON, what my purpose is in going to OCON and what my purpose will be in engaging with folks at OCON, I couldn't resist thinking in advance about what some of my answers to the usual questions will be. And this will be my advice to you for the week is consider doing something like this, not just because it's practical and useful, but it's great fun. And I would normally have used the term talking points, where you take a clipboard and write down your talking points, write down in advance what you think, what you're going to say. Except for I hate the expression talking points. It sounds so political and so fake and a little too well rehearsed. So in my book, it actually says conversation hearts.
Yes.
So my conversation hearts are talking points for the week. So for example, if somebody says, "How are you?" It's amazing how often somebody will say, "How are you?" And either you answer it with an empty, "Oh, I'm fine. How are you?" Which means nothing other than my life is in a total crisis right now, and therefore I'm able to give you the usual answer. And I tend, unfortunately, or fortunately, I think, I tend to answer this one in earnest, but also in a bit of a dramatic way. I'm inclined to say something like, "Any day above ground is a good day." Or, "Better than I've got any right to be."
Right. You do say that.
And how am I? I am surrounded by miracles, not least of which is myself, which can throw people off if they were expecting the old, "Oh, fine, how are you?" But I love having a few answers in advance, because sometimes those big, broad, silly answers are actually closer to the truth than, "Oh, fine, how are you? What have you been doing lately?
What have you been doing lately, Robert?
What have you been doing lately?" I've been doing too many podcasts and not enough writing, which, is the answer to the question, well, what are you doing next? Or what have you got coming up? Or what are you doing for the rest of the year? Which is more writing. And probably not any less podcasting, but rearranging my schedule so that I can get more writing in. What are you doing next? Tightening up both shows, working on books,
Mhm.
joining Tal Safani's happiness group.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yes. Catching up on reading in preparation for doing interviews with Chris Land, Kirk Barbera, Robert Garmong, Luke Travers, and several others. There's a to-do that's been put off too long.
Yes.
The neat thing about doing this, these rehearsals for social interaction, is that even if you never use this stuff, I see things are coming out of this
Right.
that I'd forgotten or didn't expect. And that's exactly the same kind of thing that I see happen when I take a Myers-Briggs type indicator test
Right.
or a DISC test. These things aren't useless. They need to be understood in context for what
Yes.
they are.
Right. They're good for introspection.
So that's going to make my OCON experience better than it would have been if I hadn't done those very silly exercises.
Well, my preparation for OCON is I'm going to give myself permission to go back to the hotel room and take a nap whenever I want to, because I'll probably need to do that. And and of course bow out and everything. And now I do have I was coming up with some objectivist icebreaker questions. So we're going to be meeting some new people, and so I thought, actually I was talking with Jennifer and Holly about this recently, and so of course there is the ubiquitous one, ubiquitous.
Whatever ubiquitous even means.
What is or when did you discover Ayn Rand?
When did you discover Ayn Rand?
And
she was between the sofa cushions the whole time.
Yes. And how did you discover her? And you can talk about it. That's
Amy of course has a great "When did you discover Ayn Rand" story. So if you're at OCON, make sure you ask. But yes, we will want to hear yours.
You'll
too.
have to ask me in the context of would you like the long, medium, or short version of it? You could say, Amy, how to discover Ayn Rand? Give me the short version. Then I'll know what you're looking for. So another one is one of my favorite questions is, what is your favorite philosophical concept?
What is your favorite philosophy? You have one concept that kind of
Yes.
shines through all the others?
Oh my goodness, it keeps coming up over and over all the time.
And what is that?
It is so highly abstract, and it just encompasses everything in the universe. The concepts of primacy of existence versus primacy of consciousness. And I see this in everything. And it's wonderful. And it's just so helpful. And I love it. Anyway, okay. So there's that. And then I went ahead and I tried to find other icebreaker type questions.
Icebreakers. Well, this is fun.
Yeah. Like if you had your own talk show, who would be your first 3 guests?
Living or dead?
Either one.
I would choose living ones.
Living ones. Okay. That would be
because dead ones would be gruesome.
Yes. Well, say if they actually existed still. Okay.
First 3 guests. Okay. I have to think about that one.
Yeah. If you can instantly become an expert in something, what would this something be that you'd want to be an expert in?
Answering questions on an impromptu basis.
Yes. What is the first thing you think of when you wake up in the morning?
I'm not going to answer that one on the air. But yes, an interesting question.
For me is it depends. It depends on what day it is. What childish things do you still do as an adult?
Just about everything.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Like running out in the rain.
Yes. Robert loves to run out in the rain. If it's raining and it's warm out,
I seem to find myself doing more this summer than ever in the past.
Right. And so I came up with a question that might be good, which is, do you have an early memory of when you first suspected that you thought differently than most people? How young were you? What was the context? What did you think? Because I actually do have some answers to that question. I find it quite fascinating. So let's see. Do we have anything here on the super chat? Let's see. Of course, if you want to make sure that we answer your question, please go ahead and put 99 cents towards it. However, It's easy peasy. Okay, lemon squeezy. Yeah. So for those people who are regretting not going to OCON, yes, we wish that you were there too. We're going to try to post what's going on, maybe do some Facebook lives.
So if you're looking for us at OCON, you probably can't miss us because of the color of the hair.
Right.
So Amy, you saw last week, your hair was much brighter.
Yeah, my hair is a lot brighter than I think.
But for your dance performance, you brought it down a notch.
Yeah, it's a little bit darker.
Yes.
It used to be
Whereas
like
mine, on the other
crazy
hand,
neon
is
red.
much lighter.
Yes. And messier.
Much messier.
Okay,
so that's why you get the hat today. But if you're looking for us at OCON, look for the guitar. You'll see the guitar, and the guitar will be played when Amy dances.
True.
The Baby Martin. Look for the T-shirt. Okay, we'll be doing the promo there. We got 5 minutes with Robert Nasir. And on the back, I referenced my 97.3 rule. How much time should you be spending on values versus protecting yourself against threats to your values? Yes, we'll talk about that some more too. But yes, for OCON, I couldn't resist visiting this topic because I'm going with purpose. We're adults. And by adults, I mean we're old. And by old, I mean we're paying adult prices to go to OCON. So between that and airfare and hotel, you're spending $5,000 on a week. You'd better make sure you get what you can out of it. Right. So I have my purpose in mind. And I hope that some of you will be at OCON. You will look for the shirt, you will look for the guitar, you will look for the people making more noise than everybody else, or just look for the bizarre hair. Yep. Find us. Come say hi.
Say hello to us. And actually, Eric has a nice, another little comment. He says, I think smart people treat ideas as innate more than they care to admit. So many ideas were accepted, integrated, and automatized before the age of 7. He says Peikoff's understanding of objectivism was helpful.
It really is amazing how much we are set in stone psychologically by that age.
Right.
And again, there are some folks who feel like that's a denial of free will or volition. And the exact opposite is true. As you can get from reading Leonard Peikoff, as you can get from reading the companion book there, there's 3 elements. There's your nature and your nurture, which is all most people seem to think there is. And then there's what you choose to do about it. But the fact that you get to choose what to do about it, the fact that you're driving this bus, the fact that you are the star, the script writer, and the director of this movie doesn't mean that there aren't facts that you're up against.
Right.
Or to put it more positively, facts that you get to capitalize on. You have a nature, you have a temperament, you have a psychology, you have built a character, and all of those things, those are what you are using your free will to decide now. What's my next move? What am I going to do next? What am I going to do with this life?
Right. And it's so valuable to introspect about what are those character traits, those personality traits, those temperaments and tendencies that you might have. And then you can evaluate what those are, and then you can, work with it or work against it or change yourself entirely if you can over time. But it takes work.
And have a good time
all
the time. Oh, I stole that line. Sometimes I feel like that's my entire philosophy from the keyboard player at the end.
I
of
gotta say,
Spinal Tap.
this was really, really useful. I think very, very valuable information that we just gave you. And I think it's definitely worth some more super chats. I'd like to see some $20 super chats in the comment section here with some good questions, or just say hello. We're going to be wrapping up pretty shortly and going into Clubhouse. So just want to let you know.
Wow. I have to get used to you in guerrilla marketing mode.
I stole that from Yaron Brook.
Oh, okay.
Thank
you.
You
did that
on Dr. Brook.
You did that on Sunday too. You got aggressive with the marketing. I like that. I'm a little you're my MBTI type, my introspective and shy type.
Yeah.
I'm just not the one to say, hey, give us more money, or in this
Right.
case, give the Ayn Rand Center
Right.
UK more money.
So you know what?
Actually, if you want to give us money, you could do that. If you go to robertnasir.com,
Oh, yes.
there are links to my Patreon,
Yes.
my PayPal. You could join the happy, successful. You could join the beautiful people who are already contributing at robertnasir.com.
Yes, they are. all
Don't you
beautiful.
want to be? I don't know. I think I got to work on my spiel, my shtick there. But it's true. Become part of it.
Jennifer,
Oh my God, Jennifer comes through.
Jennifer comes through.
Oh. And she says, whose body is on the thumbnail pic? Now,
I think that's Dylan's body.
I can tell you, the man who is the producer of today's show, who's usually the man behind the scenes, is also the graphic designer. I did not do the graphic. I never do the graphic design on my own thumbnails.
Yes, and what a fine graphic design that is.
And yet, although I've got to say the head looks a little big, or a big little, no, a big, a lot big. The head looks a little large for the body, Jennifer. And yes, whose body is it in? As if to say, gee, Robert, you're not that small. But I'll tell you what, and I'll share this with you. Usually this is something I would share on the Sunday show, which is much more personal. But this week I did achieve my August goal, which I had announced on the show and on my social networks. I did drop myself down to under 190 pounds, which, having started the year in January at 220, that is
if you would like to see
6/7. What is 6/7 as a percentage? That is 6/7 of my goal for the year.
right.
So
If you would like to see Robert get down to 185 pounds, please go ahead and go into the super chat, ask a question, go ahead and put in some money. And that's going to be helpful.
If they send money to the Ayn Rand Center UK, then I'm going to lose more weight.
Yes,
Anyway, the point
yes.
is, Jennifer, I will get down
Because
to that
Robert will.
really pathological looking weight that you saw in the thumbnail picture, because I'm determined to be, at least one more time in my life before I get any older, a slender guy. It's going to happen. This is another one of those cases where we're going to prove that free will is a thing, because
Yes.
there wasn't really anything external that imposed this on me other than maybe the encroaching years. But no, I was just determined to make it happen, and it is happening.
Yes. I'm just kidding. Of course.
Too much fun, though, to get
Of
that
course.
one more super chat there. We're
Yeah.
halfway to the $20 that Amy asked about. If you want to make Amy happy,
Yeah.
we're doing the yarn thing again. If you want to make Alejandra happy, if you want to make Amy happy, another $10 would get us to that goal.
Yes, I'm quite disappointed over here. I would like to see another $10. All right.
Well, Shazbot says, I checked into the hotel but cannot enter the conference until 2 p.m. tomorrow. COVID protocols need to be established.
Oh.
Ooh, are there wrinkles? Maybe it's a good thing we're not flying in until tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
But sorry to hear that there's trouble. And yeah, Daniel says, you need your own Alejandrina. Yes, yes. It's funny too, because there's an objectivist out there named Alejandro. And when I first heard Yaron talking about Alejandrina, I started wondering, is this just another person using a female persona because you're more likely to collect more money that way? But it looks like she actually is a separate person in Venezuela.
Yes.
And buying her way out of Venezuela by playing her part in the Yarn Brook show,
good.
which would mean, Daniel, that if we had our own Alejandrina, we'd probably have to pay her.
You can
Which
certainly pay
I guess
me.
would be worth it if she brought in the kind of money that Alejandrina does on the Yarn Brook show. So we're getting a little bit off topic. Again, the reason why I told you we would do a very, very quick show, a very short show, which we obviously did not do, is OCON is this week, but we were determined to bring you one more episode of Life on Earth. The real fun is going to be to see if we can pull off an on-location episode next week from the conference. Won't that
Yes.
be fun? But
On
thank you so
Sunday.
much for joining us. And we're not done. We're not done yet, because what we're going to do is jump over to Clubhouse, where we can talk to you by voice, audio technology, like some terrible conference call in the middle of a meeting you didn't want to go to, but actually fun and interesting. So let's do that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
And
we'll
we're going to
see
go
you
over to
there.
Clubhouse now. Goodbye, you good people.
Have a great rest of the day.